Okay, folks, so welcome to our last class. I'm not sure whether the semester feels like it's gone on very long or gone by very fast, but either way, the semester is coming to a close tomorrow. So before I get going to the topics for today, just some announcements. As you know, we have two tutorials tomorrow from 4 to 5 and from 5 to 6. You can show up to whichever or uh, stay on for both. So then LH534, that's the first announcement. And there's one short reading to read and think about there. Your PMTs will take me a couple of days to put up. So that's basically SAQ 5 and also your assignment 1 marks. So those I'll put up. I've put up 3 short questions for which I'm getting due on midnight of the day of your actual major. So as you know, the major itself will be what you call it. It's going to be a take home. I've also put up on Piazza the other two components. Well, let me maybe just open Piazza. It will be easier to walk through these announcements. So I've put up assignment 2, and I have also put up your writing reflection. I haven't had these two Moodle as yet, but let's just walk through this. Okay, so this is assignment 2. Or let me share my screen.
And sir, what do you mean by like makeup assignment? Won't our assignment 1 be
I'll tell you.
counted grading?
Let's just go one announcement at a time. Okay, so this is the second announcement. It's that article by Narendra Dabholkar on Scientific Outlook, and I want you to think about what he says in the light of the article by Paul Thagard, which is on astrology and pseudoscience. So science and superstition is the title of, or is the concern that Dabholkar has as a kind of, anti-superstition activist. And Paul Thagard is a philosopher of science who's interested in some of the same questions. And what you're being asked to do is to think about, from the theoretical questions that Thagard is interested in, what he might say or how one might rethink some of Dabholkar's main claims. This I have not put up as yet in Moodle, but I am going to, and I'm going to put it due probably around the 15th of April. So give you 2 weeks to work on it, and that's a few days after the formal end of majors. There's a writing reflection also for 20 marks. Questions is straightforward. What, if anything, have you got out of this course? Has it led you to rethink or question any beliefs or practices you may have had before joining this course? Pick some particular topic, reading, or tool which you found especially engaging or interesting. Why did it spark your interest? How would you explain it to a friend or relative who has not taken the course? 3, if you were to teach this course, what would you do differently? As you can see, extremely open-ended questions, not something that I think that there's an obviously right or wrong answer to. I think it'd be totally fine for you to say, look, you've not got anything out of the course because ABC. I'm not going to judge you for saying positive versus negative things. But what I am looking for is some evidence of, having thought through this issue and having considered, why you answer the way you do. That's what I'm looking for. So essentially now, let me turn to this point about the revised evaluation scheme. The assignment 1, which you've already done, which I just have to grade and give back to you, is for 20 marks. assignment 2, which is the assignment on double cut, was going to be for 30 marks. That was the initial evaluation scheme. So I've brought it down. I've brought that down to 20 marks. And so you have 2 assignments for 40 marks and a writing reflection for 20 marks. That's 60 marks. And to answer Raji's question, there'll be a makeup assignment for assignment 1. Basically, I'm going to give you 3 assignments of 20 marks each. You're welcome to attempt all 3, or you can attempt 2. But if you attempt all 3, I'll pick the top 2 of those. So, for instance, if you feel like you've not done well in your in that first assignment on remember that Nathan Robinson propaganda about Israeli shooting Palestinians in Gaza. If you haven't done well in that, then you'll have another chance to do a similar kind of assignment to make it up. So that's 60 marks, and then your short answer questions are a total of 40 marks. So that's 8 questions of 5 marks each, but I'll give you a total of 10 and pick the top 8. Does that make sense? And by the weekend, you'll have, I guess, a total of 45 marks worth of information. That is 20 marks of your assignment 1, and then 25 marks of short answer questions. How does that sound? No questions, doubts, comments?
What, sir? What did you say?
Hemant, you joined a little bit late. I was just going through. I see something in the chat. What is the audit criteria? That I've already mentioned, but isn't it too late to audit a course now? Oh, but maybe you already have audited a class. 30%. Anything else? Hemant, I was just going through the various announcements about the assignments that are up, and I've changed the evaluation scheme. Essentially, I've just cut 10 marks out of assignment 2 and put that into 2 short answer questions.
Yeah, of course. And I think there were 30, 20. Sir, but where the minor marks have gone?
That's why I'm calling assignment. What I called here in the evaluation minor, I'm calling it assignment 1. That's it's the same thing.
And the major.
So what is called major?
10 marks we have allotted to short answer questions, and for another 20 marks for assignment 2.
Yeah, so there's no specific major. I'm just calling it assignment 2, and minor I'm calling assignment 1.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. It makes sense.
Okay. So I don't think. Well, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think about whether it's onerous or. I mean, I hope that I think the short answer questions will also make you think.
Basically, for tomorrow's tute, I have a issue basically because from 5 to 6 I have a quiz.
You have a quiz. Well, 4 to 5. I've put it 4 to 6 basically.
Yeah, 4 to 6. Yeah, but tomorrow I have to. I also have a term paper submission, so I will give my.
Okay. Well, that's too bad. But you know what I'll do is maybe I'll stick around in
Till
the.
5, I think what term paper submission is the deadline for term paper submission is till 5 p.m. So,
For some other term paper.
Yeah, for another course.
You know what I'm going to do is I'll stick around in the assigned exam slot for majors. So if I don't get to see you guys tomorrow, you can drop in and into that room. You can work there. We can say hi. That's also fine.
Sir, this lecture 534 is in main building or in LHC?
LHC. So that prefix LH is for LHC. Tomorrow's in-person tutorial. So when it says Whenever it says LH, that's the
I
lecture
think you have
hall.
written this in the main building. So the main building is
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry about that. That's my bad. In the lecture hall complex. What comes of typing up stuff for not much sleep? Okay, any other questions?
no, sir.
Okay, in that case, let's move on to the topic of today's course, which is the last bit of our discussion of Kahneman, thinking fast and slow, and the real topic or the real question that Kahneman is well, as with the rest of the book, you can think of each of Kahneman's chapters as doing two things. And I mentioned this before. One is just describing in a in a descriptive kind of way some aspects of how our minds work, and then there's the kind of normative question of saying, hey, this aspect of how minds work can lead us into certain kinds of error. So we have to show what the error is and how this aspect of how our minds work contributes to that error. So the particular phrase or terminology for this particular chapter is called something called sometimes called the representativeness heuristic. And what's the key thought there? That if you're trying to judge whether some individual belongs to a particular class, the way our minds tend to work is you look at the characteristics of that individual, you look at the characteristics of like a stereotypical element of that class, and then you see how how closely this individual relates to that stereotype. So in the example that he's interested in, he thinks of the classes in question are classes of like occupation for a graduate student, a PhD student, and the one that he's finally particularly interested in is this one on computer science. So then the question is, well, he's not only interested in computer science, but you describe some particular individual's characteristics, and then you ask, hey, which is it more likely that this person, which stream is this person likely to be pursuing? And Kahneman's point is, the way our minds work will typically be to think of who's the, what are the stereotypical elements of somebody who is interested in business administration versus what are the, stereotypical characteristics associated with computer science, etc., etc. How closely they match with that stereotype. If they match very closely, you think, okay, look, this person is studying this, is in this stream. If they don't match very closely, you think, look, it's quite unlikely that this person is studying in this stream. And what is missed out in this kind of exercise is any consideration of overall probabilities of how many people there are in various different kinds of streams. So the thing that the representativeness heuristic is just a description of how our minds work. It can lead us to certain kinds of mistakes, and the kind of mistake that in this chapter he's most interested in is sometimes called the base rate fallacy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So in a way, there, if you think of a takeaway from this this chapter is really the takeaways. Think about base rates. Think about the underlying distribution of, let's say, people in different streams when you're deciding how likely it is that somebody belongs to some particular stream. So let's maybe go through the exercise that he himself goes through. If I asked you to bring to mind what is like a typical person what are some characteristics of a typical person who does business administration? Somebody's an MBA, say, look, what is the image that springs to your mind of somebody who does an MBA?
Wearing a suit.
Okay, this is a person wearing a suit. What else? Anyone?
Sir, in what context you are supposed to we are supposed to provide any information about business administration?
Oh, I'm just there's no particular context. I'm saying, in your head when I say, if I say, look, let's meet my friend tomorrow. He's doing an MBA. What is the image of this person? Do you form some kind of image?
Whether that person is studying MBA right now or he is working in a company.
Let's say right now. We're talking about people studying right now.
Basically, I don't know much.
Okay. What about if I said my friend is studying law?
Law. So basically, everything like we will the first thing which in my mind came that maybe he is going to become an advocate or like some yes.
Okay, so this is a person who wants to become an advocate. Anything else? Anything that just without thinking, just strikes your mind?
Yeah,
The
basically
association with law.
lawyer and advocates like that.
They're going to be advocates, and any qualities that advocates have.
I don't know. I don't know about law and.
When you think of an advocate, what do you think of?
Good at arguments, like.
You think they're good at arguments?
I mean, they can back up their points in an argument.
Maybe they're articulate. They back up their points.
They're wearing that lawyer dress.
They're wearing that lawyer dress. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. What about okay? So whether you were going to say something?
They catch on to little things like the details of whatever people are saying.
They're kind of detail oriented. So let's type this out. Okay. So what you said, characteristics associated. One, care about arguments. Two, detail oriented. Three, wears black gowns. Yes, like to argue. I guess that's different from care about arguments. Okay, what about engineering? You're all engineers. What is your stereotype, or what do you think people? Yeah, what is your stereotype of what an engineering student is like? I mean, before you joined IIT, what was your stereotype of what an engineering student is like?
Solving problems.
Okay, hang on, so I'm going to write this out. Say, engineering stereotype. Into solving problems.
Good with tools, in a sense, like They always surround themselves with some kind of hardware tools.
Good with hardware tools.
Yes,
Okay.
or we can say that like coding, working on computer or writing codes.
Works a lot on the computer.
Yeah.
Quite self-dependent, I think. Like, if they acquire a problem, they'll try to solve it first before approaching anyone else. Like a practical problem.
Independent minded.
Creating something new, like.
Okay, we have a lot more. I was going for 4 each, but okay, we'll go for one more. So inventive. Can you say that is the likes inventing things? Okay, so now suppose I came to you and I said, hey, I have this friend. Uh, she's really into solving problems. She likes inventing things. She's independent minded. She spends a lot of time on the computer. Um, she's good with her hands. Um, what is she more likely to be doing? Is she more likely to be an engineer or more likely to be a lawyer? What would you say?
So in my opinion, the things you said, invent things does the major work. Like for me at least,
Okay.
like invent things points towards engineering a lot more than any of the other points. Like all of them are a lot more uniform, you could say. But invent is not something most people do.
Okay, so it's a characteristic that is very close to the stereotype of an engineer, that separates out in your mind what engineers are like from non-engineers.
Sort of, sir.
Okay, so is that true then for most of you people, that if I came to you, this is essentially a variation of the example that Kahneman gives. If I said my friend has these 5 characteristics, and I ask you, what do you think? Is my friend um, more likely to be an engineer or more likely to be a lawyer? Would most of you say they're more likely to be an engineer?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Specifically,
Yes,
good
sir.
with hardware tools is not in the category of being a lawyer.
Okay, so now suppose I said that in a population of 100, maybe it's not true of our country, but let's say suppose I said in the population in question, 50%. What if I said 50% of my friends lawyers, 10% are. Oh, actually, let me make it even simpler. Let me say 90% of my friends lawyers and 10% would that change? Suppose I gave you that as part of the background information. Would that change the your initial reaction to my question?
For me,
Sir,
answer
can you
will be
repeat the
same.
question?
Okay, so there are 2-3 people. So my question is, I'm asking you 2 questions, right? The first question was my friend has um, Q is more likely to be an engineer or a lawyer? That is the first question. Oops. Now my second question, and into that, it seemed like you guys were quite understandably saying, look, it's more likely to be an engineer, and it's plausible to think that in your mind you compared this this description that I just gave with this mental stereotype and said, look, it matches. Now I'm giving you another piece of information. I'm telling you 90% of my friends are lawyers and 10% of them are engineers. Now, once I give you this information, does that change your answer? Now I'm asking again, Q.
I wouldn't say that lawyers are very much like I don't think that engineers like problems with respect to lawyers that much. Like I'm not sure that if you simply consider with respect to solving problems, there is such a big difference between engineers and lawyers.
Okay, anyone else? So the question to ask is, does your answer to the question,
Basically,
change before or after you know this piece of information? So
Yes, sir. Even
Hemant,
after
Ratnesh, and Aditya. Hang on, Hemant, Ratnesh.
okay, sir. Basically, in this case, we can say it may be an engineer or it may be lawyer because there is no fixed answer. I
There's
don't
no.
think there is no fixed answer. Basically, it's we can
Yeah, these are probabilities. These are what you think is more likely. So yeah, it's not maybe not an exact answer.
Can we sir say this that it depends on the country also because in India maybe there my friend will be an engineer in mostly maybe my 10% of friends are engineers but in that if my friend is in problem solving then it may likely be to be an engineer basically.
Well, I'm telling you that this is the quality of my friend, and I'm also telling you that this is the distribution of my friends in professions. So that's the context. Do we need more background context, or given this context, does it change your answer? Now, Ratnesh and Aditya.
Yes, sir. So while reading statement A, I cannot really say that if she is an engineer or a lawyer because when you say problem solving, I personally don't think like that problem solving is a specific trait of engineers. Like problem solving, like everybody solves problems, and when it comes to like especially solving problems of like professionally, I cannot say that only engineers solve problem. Even lawyers solve problems. So I can't say after reading statement one if she is an engineer or a lawyer. She may be an engineer or maybe a lawyer, or and even after reading second statement, I'm not quite sure that what she is like. She can fall into 10% of people, or she can fall into 90%. So I'm not sure about. Like I need more information to know about her, or whether she is an engineer or a lawyer.
Okay, so let me step back one thing, and I know Mukul has raised his hand and Aditya has wanted to speak. Let me ask one more question. Suppose I just gave, okay, Sujit also had his hand up. Suppose you didn't know this. Okay, suppose all I said, I just give you two pieces of information. I just said, I want you to meet a friend of mine tomorrow, and just to let you know, 90% of my friends are lawyers and 10% of them are engineers. And I asked you, what's the probability that the friend you're meeting tomorrow is going to be an engineer or a lawyer? What would you say? Suppose I didn't say anything about this.
Then definitely I will say that she can be a lawyer.
Right, because 9 out of 10 of my friends are lawyers. And so if you didn't know anything about anything else about this person you wanted to meet, you'd say, hey, much more likely to be a lawyer than an engineer, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sujit and Mukul and Aditya, I have not forgotten you. But let me say a couple of things. So this piece of information, is a piece of information about base rates. And now the question is, suppose I tell you now, okay, my friend is into solving problems, etc. Should you still consider, based on the stereotypes, that she's more likely to be an engineer than a lawyer? Kahneman's point is no, because, or at least that your answer should still be driven largely by the fact that there's this base rate, and just the fact that there's a closer connection between the stereotype of a lawyer, the stereotype of an engineer, and the characteristics of this friend whom I have described, doesn't mean that she's more likely to be an engineer, because after all, the information you have doesn't say that the majority of people who have these characteristics are engineers. At most, perhaps you might think the majority of engineers have this characteristic. So one thing to ask you is to think about, to notice the distinction between these two statements. One, most engineers are with tools independent, minded, like problem solving, etc. That's one. And two, I'm going to say is most people who do you see a distinction between these two statements, 1 and 2? Suppose in our population of 90, well, let's say 9 out of 10 of my friends, suppose I have 10 friends, or let's take it, maybe that'd be two. Suppose I have 100 friends, 90 of my friends are lawyers and 10 of them are engineers. How would you evaluate these statements with respect to that situation? I'll say that the 10 out of the 10 engineers who are my friends, maybe 7 of them meet this have this characteristic. Can I say from the fact that this statement holds of my friends, does it follow that this statement holds of my friends? That's the kind of thing that's very much easier to show with a Venn diagram on a black border. Yeah, Aditya.
The base rule thing, right?
So go ahead, say more.
Like the first one is what is the probability of A if B, and the second one is what is the probability of B if A, and both of them are different.
So let's say what is A here?
A is that the person is good with tools, independent, and like problem solving, etc. And B is that they're an engineer. So the first is the probability of A if B, and the second is probability of B if A.
That's right. And now remember the question I asked you. The question was, is my friend more likely to be an engineer or a lawyer, given that 90% of my friends are lawyers and 10% are engineers, and that my friend is into solving problems and so forth.
So the only thing that matters is what is the probability B if A and your friends, right?
That's right.
And
We don't have that information, right?
We don't have that information.
Okay, so in the absence of that information, what is the next best thing that you could use as a proxy? Or at least what's the bound?
So at the we could at the most we could estimate how more likely do you think that engineers are to like problem solving.
That's one way of doing it, but here's a bound, right? It's not going to be more likely than the likelihood of any friend of mine being an engineer to begin with. It's not going to be more than 10%.
So it could be more than 10%. So let's say all your engineers all your engineer friends like problem solving, but none of your lawyer friends like problem solving. Then problem B if A is 100%.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry. But do you see the fact that the question of how many of my friends are engineers has to be quite an important factor into determining this question?
Yes, sir. That helps us tells us what probability B if A is. But if we know probability B if A, we can directly tell you what the answer is.
If you already knew that.
Yeah. So, but to estimate probability B if A, we will either need to know either we'll directly need to know, or we'll need to know how much more likely engineers are to be A than lawyers, and what the base rate of engineer and lawyers are. And stereotypes essentially tell us about the first kind of thing, that how much more likely a given group is to be like a particular thing.
And if you focus just on the stereotype, then you ignore
the base rate.
You are in danger of ignoring just what is the relative proportion of engineers in the population in question. So the lesson of, and now I'll open it up to questions. Really, the lesson of this chapter is don't ignore that fact. Don't ignore the probability that the person is an engineer relative to everything else. It's still it's still going to dominate in the absence of other information. Okay, so there are a bunch of people. So I'll just take. I know that Mukul, Sujit, and Rafnesh wanted to speak. So Mukul, why don't you go first?
I was just saying that your initial question that whether your answer would change after getting the second piece of information. So I was just saying that yes, my answer would change.
And in what way?
Because like you have told that 90% of your friends are lawyers. So if you just ignore the characteristic of your friend for once, then there are 9 in 10 chances that your friend is a lawyer. And so with this piece of information, we might think that that friend is a rare case and it's an exception. He's an exception. So there is a possibility that he is an engineer, but the traits that he has are those of an engineer, but he's a lawyer because there are more chances of him being a lawyer from the second piece of information that you have given me.
Right, which is because you know that so many of your friends are likely to be lawyers. Again, in the absence of more information, well, it might be that there are many people who are non-engineers who have the same trait.
Yes.
Just the fact that this is a stereotypical trait associated with engineers, and that the stereotypical traits associated with lawyers don't have this, doesn't show that if you, I mean, it may well be, for all that we've said, that you can still have, and it may be a very large percentage of people who have those stereotypical traits, but actually in a different profession.
Yes.
And if you know this distribution is skewed towards lawyers, then in the absence of this kind of information that it's, this kind of trait is only associated 1-1 with or very highly likely with engineers, you should put into your calculation, and you can do it in a precise way using Bayes' rule, which I don't know if people are all familiar with. You should then count the Bayes traits as an important part of your answer. Okay, others, so Sujit and Ratnesh.
So about changing the answer, I would say, sir, that the first four of the qualities that into solving problems, working a lot on computer, independent minded, and being good with hardware tools. This can be qualities of a lawyer too. But being good with hardware tools has a less possibility, but a lawyer can be good at all this. But I will have ambiguity in the quality of inventing things, because as far as I know, for me, generally, lawyers don't invent things as of my idea. I mean, I don't deny that they can't invent things, but for me, it's not possible, as I haven't seen any example. So maybe I will need more data about it to get to a final conclusion.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, because inventing thing that keeps me more towards an engineering side. But I also have a lot of data that 90% of your friends are lawyers, and the other qualities that a lawyer may have. So I will need more data.
So at the very least, suppose we dropped liked inventing things from that list of stereotypes. One lesson is, even when there's a very close match with the stereotype, right? This person I'm telling you about matches the stereotype of this occupation group. Just the fact that there's so many more people of the other occupation group should factor in more so than it tends to do. So our minds tend to disregard that piece of information when we're faced with the stereotype match, or the representativeness match. That's the lesson that Kahneman wants to give. Ratish, you had a question.
Sir, I don't have a question, but when you have written these two sentences at the last, like most engineers are good with tools, independent-minded, and like problem solving, etc., etc. So in these two statements, I feel that the first statement is more correct than the second. Like when you say that, like most people who like tools are independent-minded, like problem solving, etc., etc. So like I don't feel that people who like tools are more likely to become an engineer. Like people are there, like who like there is, let's say there is some problem in your bicycle or car. They will solve these problems, but they are like they may not be. They are not all of them are not all of them. I should not say, like most of them are not or none of them are like engineers, but they are more comfortable with more like more capable of solving this problem, more competent in solving this like problems which arise like in this what you can say, vehicles or everything, than an engineer. Like we are engineers, but like if you give us to solve a real problem, like if there is some problem in our vehicle or anything, we can't really solve. We know the theory, but we don't really are able to solve this problem. So when it comes to like more comfortable with tools, I cannot say that they are like engineers. But when you were saying that most engineers are good with tools. That can be because they are trained to do so. But the other statement, I'm not feeling that it is it is more related to engineers or
So good,
correct
right?
more.
So, and what might drive this effect in the case I have in mind is, look, yeah, there may be many lawyers who also have these characteristics. Just because in the population of engineers, many of the engineers have the characteristic, doesn't mean that the the characteristic is exclusive to them. And so if I'm just giving you if I'm just giving the information that the person has this characteristic, well, we need more information to figure out whether it's but to figure out whether they're lawyers or engineers. Yeah, Sujit.
So, sir, about the last quality, digging more into it, that likes inventing things. The way you say that he likes inventing things. So, I would say that it's not something that he some eventually or some rarely does. He likes inventing things. That means he does it on regular basis or maybe kind of a profession. So that's another side of it. That maybe he could be into more of inventing things.
Fair enough. So I think to make the example more vivid, maybe I would drop that. But how, just to maybe give you a couple more examples to get your to get the key point across. Let's talk about the here we are. There's the this is the kind of point that Kahneman wants to have us take away. And why don't we have? I'm going to invite Hemant to to speak rather than ask volunteers, since he always volunteers first. So Hemant, why don't you start reading from this judging the sins of representativeness?
So from where the sins of representativeness, judging probability bias, representativeness bias. Sir, what is this? Wow.
Yeah, that's also, so it's just judging probability by representativeness.
By representativeness has important virtues. The intuitive impressions that it produces are often indeed usually more accurate than chance guesses would be. On most occasions, people who act friendly are in fact friendly. A professional athlete who is very tall and thin is much more likely to play basketball than football. People with a PhD are more likely to subscribe to the New York Times than people who ended their education after high school. Young men are more likely than elderly women to drive aggressively. In all these cases and in many others, there is some truth to the stereotypes that govern judgments of representativeness and predictions that follow. This heuristic may be accurate. In
Just
other
pause there.
situations,
So that's an important point. And if you read, again, I'm just giving you a jhalak of this kind of literature, and it's important to see that these shortcuts that human beings are prone to make, for the most part, of maybe for a very large portion of the time, are completely sensible um, shortcuts. Not like something that we want to eradicate from our the way we reason entirely. So carry on.
so in other situations, the stereotypes are false and representativeness heuristic will mislead, especially if it causes people to neglect base rate information that points in another direction. Even when the heuristic has some validity, exclusive reliance on it is associated with grave sins against statistical logic. One sin of representativeness is an excessive willingness to predict the occurrence of unlikely low base rate events. Here is an example. You see a person reading the New York Times on the New York subway. Which of the following is a better bet about the reading stranger? She has a PhD, she doesn't have a college degree.
Okay, so hang on. So if the example is not, the New York Times is not a familiar example, let's assume that the person is reading like some complicated famous. What's the name of like some famous English novel? A complicated famous English novel or famous novel. Like War and Peace. Have people heard the name of War and Peace?
Yes, sir. I have.
Yes,
Not hard copy, soft copy, but I haven't read it.
I guess it's a Russian novel, not an English one. So now suppose
That is also the Communist Manifesto and other Pride and Prejudices.
so you can take Pride and Prejudice. Just take some complicated, or some novel, and you see somebody on the Delhi metro reading War and Peace, or Pride and Prejudice may be a better example. Which of the following is a better bet? That they have a PhD or that they don't have a college degree? How many of you think it's a better bet to say that this person has a PhD? Sujit, Sumedha. Anyone else? Oh, Sumedha, why don't you explain your reasoning?
I mean, it is more of an instinctual reaction to the information. Like you mentioned, that it is a complicated novel, and like assuming that the person who is actually reading it understands it, then it's kind of like saying that they have the mental capacity of being a PhD student. More like being a PhD student suits more to them.
Having completed a PhD, so maybe it doesn't matter that much. Okay.
I mean, PhD students have a much more developed understanding or the worldview than a person who doesn't have a college degree, not yet at least. But in a sense, in understanding literary complicated texts.
Okay. For the people who don't agree with Sumedha, how would you convince her that she's wrong? Anyone?
Sir, I think according to mine, if anyone if she is reading this War and Peace novel in a metro, then maybe he's just going through, he just having a look of it, or like we can say is time pass or because in metro nobody is supposed to read basically. If we
Okay, so that's like a very specific.
If she has a PhD holder.
I mean, ignore the casual reading stance. Like the point was whether the person actually understands what the author is trying to say, and it's like literary complicated text.
But we cannot say that.
You just have this you see this person, they have the book open in their lap, and they're reading it. We don't know more of this information, but Ratnesh has a hand up. So Ratnesh, you don't agree with Sumedha. So why do you think?
Yes, sir. I also agree because I don't think reading a novel or like it is required a PhD for reading that novel. Even if I can say only one thing that yes, if she is reading this novel War and Peace, then definitely she is good in English. Like not all people can read if the novel is complicated. So, but just reading this novel doesn't define that she is a PhD.
Okay,
I mean, that was not the question whether she has a PhD or not, which is more likely. Like, if she's reading a complicated novel, it's more likely that her levels of education are high.
Basically, sir, if she is a PhD holder, then why will maybe she will read this novel in library, not in metro, basically.
Okay, Hemant, hang on. So there are other people who want to speak. So Aditya and then Sujit.
Like I would this is about convincing Sumedha, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that the number of PhDs is very small, especially in India. Like even in the world, I think only 1 or 2% of the people have PhD, and it is probably much lower in India, right? Like it is really small. and even the number of people who have a college degree is only like 10% in India. And then even consider the fact that the person could just be younger than, like, she could be in 12th or 11th, and you can still read War and Peace. Like, she would have gotten a college degree, but she is too young to get a college degree, which I would consider more likely than the person having a PhD. Because
So if you think of
very few people have PhDs.
So if you think of the universe of people, so it may be that in the universe of people who have PhDs, many of them would, I don't know, enjoy reading this kind of novel. But in the universe of people who are able to read this sort of novel, very few of very few of those would have PhDs, and that's partly a function of the fact that very few people have PhDs, full stop.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I understand your point, but it's more of like not many people read the complicated novels either and understand it, like not casually reading. Like if I see a high school student, like maybe 11th 12th, I'll just reading a really complicated piece where like experts have a lot to say about it and everything. There are analysis on that piece. I would just assume that either they don't really understand what it's all about, or like they're casually reading that piece. The point was, if she's reading and like quite interested, and it seems that she understands what she's reading, then like that was my point of interest.
Okay, Sujit wants to come in, and then what we'll do is we'll read a little bit more of what Kahneman himself wants to say. Sujit, go ahead.
So first of all, to make this question a little narrow, I would say if you are considering the person has PhD, then I would say that the person is something around the age of 28 to 30. So that person either have taken the education or dropped out of education after the high school. So that narrows down is straight to either they have something good education. And so about what Aditya said, he said that most of the Indians, around 90 to, let us consider 90% people don't even have the college degree. So I would say that after dropping out of the education, about 95 to 99% of them, they after stop taking education, they start to find themselves some jobs or start to earning money. So they will be more of into earning money than reading some novel or a book. Or in that case, their lifestyle is of a different kind. I mean, they need money, so they will not buy a book like this and read it. So that's the case. And most of the maybe 2% of Indians have a PhD, but most of them would be into reading such a novel.
Just a thing. 2% is way too high. Like it is
Okay.
very high. You are considering 2% is very high.
Like,
Okay, maybe 0.2%, is that fine?
Okay, let's go
It's
ahead.
probably
Aditya.
closer, but 2% is probably very high.
Whatever it is, let's say X%, but most of them will be into reading such novels. And the who have dropped out of school, most of them won't be into reading such books. There may be a case that some guy who likes reading books and he's reading this book, but considering the probability, I would say that he's a PhD holder, because as I already said, most of PhD holders would be into reading such books than those who dropped out of schools.
Okay, so hang on. So let's do Rajiv, and then we'll go down further to what Kahneman says. Go ahead, Rajiv.
So like I would go in a reverse way, like it is less likely that he or she would have PhD, because you see, like suppose that first of all the PhD, there are how many possibilities he or she could have PhD. like PhD in physics, in mathematics, in computer science, in psychology, and in whatever. Okay, so what people do in PhD? I mean, first like there are most likely to be like the experiments things. Okay, so the thing is, like, suppose if I am doing a PhD, then um, I want to study the things which are not in my syllabus because I want to focus on my things, right?
No, this person on the metro, they're on their way to their
Yeah,
university,
yeah, yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
yeah. So even on the metro, I would I would not study that, like I will be thinking of some kind of like thought experiment of physics or something like that. I'm saying that the person who really do PhD by his like by his intention, or not just like, okay, so we do PhD masters and then we do PhD, not like that. By his intentionally he is doing PhD, then he won't do that. I would say, like, I won't do these things. So
Okay, so hang on. So let's now I'm going to pause on the responses and we just go on and see what Kahneman has to say. Um, so Hemant, why don't you carry on reading this?
From representativeness would tell you to bet on the PhD, but this is not necessarily wise. You should seriously consider the second alternative because many more non-graduates than PhDs ride in New York subways. And if you must guess whether a woman who is described as a shy poetry lover studies Chinese literature or business administration, you should opt for the latter option. Even if every female student of Chinese literature is shy and loves poetry, it is almost certain that there are more base school poetry lovers in the much larger population of business students. People
Okay, so just
without
pause there. So that's the key, at least, and I think Aditya, who I think has a fair amount of prior exposure to Kahneman's ideas, is the only one who's latching onto it. Then it's got to make some difference that the relative proportion of people who are PhD holders and people who are non college degree holders, whether in uh, India or the US, like that fact is going to have some pretty important bearing on the question of how likely it is that this random person who you see um, uh, reading War and Peace or Pride and Prejudice is it's a PhD student or not. So Kahneman is not saying, look, that you have to only look at the base rates, because obviously, new information will narrow down or exclude certain kinds of possibilities. But uh, the key point he wants you to take away is it's very easy once you have that additional information to forget about questions about um, what the relative, what is the base rate. Aditya, did you want to say something more? Your hand has been up. I can't. I don't know if it's from earlier.
I don't think so. I was just looking up at the statistics.
Huh.
The most I could find about PhDs was that India had 24,000 PhDs a few years back, like for the year, 24,000 new PhDs in 2018.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find any other numbers relating to PhDs. But that still shows, right? 24,000 is a very low number compared to like 1.3 billion, which is the population of India.
I mean, so yeah, so you might start asking the question: what is the chance that some random person in the subway has a PhD? And that seems like a really, really low number.
So actually, I was more wondering about how will the subway change it, because very few people in India live in cities, right? And
Yeah.
those ones will be like almost all PhDs would live in cities. I like very few of them would like. I don't think you should even consider the people if there are any PhDs who live in. If there are an appreciable number of PhDs who live in rural areas. So I'm not sure if the fact that they are in subways would tip it towards PhD, because that is a very big shift.
the question still is like, what proportion of random people in the subway are going to be PhDs? How likely is it that somebody who is on the subway has a PhD? And that's going to be like a very, very small number.
But like it's a very small number, but it matters, right? How small it is. Like is it 0.1 or is it 0.01 or is it 1? Like these three are all very small numbers, but each of them will have a very different answer, because the number of people on the subway who can read War and Peace is also very small. Who would be like you have probably seen 100 people on the subway and none of them were
I
reading
think
War and Peace, right?
this question has much more dependence on various factors. Like if you consider subway that runs nearby IIT Delhi, then it's much more likely to find a PhD holder on that subway, like on metro or whatever.
I think this is what Kahneman's point is, right? There are a lot of factors here which you can only look up the number to check which one is the right, which is what is the right
Yeah.
answer. You can't just say it.
That's right. So I think that's the takeaway from Kahneman's point is these numbers have got to be relevant. You know, maybe we don't know what those numbers are, but they've got to be relevant and pretty important. And the fact that you know, in our mind we have an easier image of the PhD student reading the novel than, let's say, the person who I don't know, did English medium class 12 and, you know, got married and didn't get a degree. We don't have an immediate association with that person as being interested in novels, even though maybe they grew up in a household, maybe their parents were, or, you know, whatever. Maybe one of their siblings was really into English literature. We don't have that stereotype in our mind. Kahneman's point is, when you're thinking about probabilities, be wary of reasoning from stereotypes, because the information is, or the relevant information is contained actually in these background background based, and you know that may be very hard to find out. So in many cases, maybe one should just be agnostic. It's a little bit like the point he makes in that previous chapter, right? When he I can't remember what the context was. Yeah, in the context of sampling, right? You think, look, we have these intuitive judgments that we make, but we often, you know, which are made by system 1 and endorsed by system 2, we often get it wrong, and therefore kind of system 2 needs some kind of guidance and in a way professional training to tell us what to do in these circumstances, right? So it may be that, you know, Bayes' rule is the correct rule to apply in some circumstances, or maybe some sampling theory, which, you know, I know very little about, or almost nothing. You know, that's the correct rule to apply in these contexts. So a lot of this is about just being somewhat suspicious of your intuitions when it comes to reasoning with probability and data. But I'll stop there. You know, it's a huge literature, and Kahneman is just one example of many people who are who write about this stuff. I'll see if I can pull up some more references. But we're also now close to out of time, and I thought maybe it's just helpful to think back to what all different things we've done. We've finished now this section on thinking about, really it's about two different things. I called it thinking about numbers and data, but essentially because we've been doing this through the lens of Kahneman's work. Like I said, it's about understanding how our minds work, and that, if you remember, was a theme actually right at the start of the course, when we looked at issues about propaganda and Nazi propaganda. There was that one reading about different kinds of mental effects that might make one susceptible to propaganda. So that's one theme of the course, is um, understanding how our minds work and how vulnerabilities in how our minds work can be exploited or can lead us into error. There's another element which is again working backwards from this Kahneman type stuff, thinking about issues like the halo effect or confirmation bias. What's actually wrong with uh, reasoning in those ways? One aspect is, if you're reasoning in those ways, often you're reasoning on the basis of very little data, and that's an important takeaway, both from Kahneman's work and also I think the material on the philosophy of science. Always be sensitive to the amount of data or evidence on the basis of which you're making some kind of claim, and think about, particularly when people are very confident, what kind of information they're reasoning on the basis of. And you can think of at least some of the material on philosophy of science is being responsive to this kind of idea. So that's been another stream in the course, is being kind of cautious or self-aware about the evidence base upon which to base our beliefs. And we saw in that material from the Azim Premji textbook, one way to be sensitive to this evidence base, right? To think about whether the reasoning that gets you from the premises to the conclusions is logical, deductively valid or not. And we saw in the material on informal fallacies various ways in which you could be distracted from the question about evaluating the evidence of the arguments themselves. And I would say the fourth strand of the course, which came right at the start, was this thing of, as critical thinkers, being self-aware about the language in which claims, arguments are made, and be sensitive to how they might affect how we think, without kind of being passed through our critical thinking facility. Just how words can have a kind of hidden or unconscious capacity to persuade us, bypassing our rational faculties. And actually, if you recall, we talked about framing effects right in the start of the course. And interestingly, Kahneman is one of the people who did some of the early work on framing effects in really quite a different context. But the thought is still the same, that the presentation of how information, often the presentation of information, whether it's data, whether it's of sentences in some kind of natural language, that might have some kind of bearing or effect on how one thinks about that issue, and one should be a little bit self-aware of that particular fact. So that's one kind of way in which I see the course having the different threads of the course coming together. But I'll throw it open to you guys. Let's say we have another 5 minutes. Do you get a sense of the course having like being about the same thing, more or less, or does it feel like we're discussing very different things in different parts of the course? How does it hang together in your minds?
Feels about one thing, basically.
Say it again.
Like it feels like about different tools for one thing. Like a hammer and a screwdriver are very different, but you can use them while building the same thing.
So I guess that's my question. Does it feel like it's one thing?
Like it depends on what you exactly mean by.
Well,
it's
you're the
one
one
thing, right?
who
Like
mentioned
our
it. Yeah.
hammer and a screwdriver, one thing. You can use them while doing one thing. You can use them both while doing one thing, but they're also different tools. So it's like that, right?
So what is
Everything
the one thing? I put it this way: what is the one thing that you think these different tools are, whatever, helping us do?
I would say something like accuracy in your model of the world. I'm not sure if everybody would put it that way, but I would put it something like that.
Okay. Building better mental models of not mental models, building better models of the way the world is.
Yes.
Okay. Would people agree with that? So I hadn't thought of that as
Yes,
a formulation.
I will say it give like it give us to like think in a different way. Like we do usually think in the way like it improves like the way we think.
Okay. Anyone else?
Maybe analyzing things more clearly.
So analysis. Maybe.
Yes, sir.
To see through manipulations.
So one context has been manipulation, yeah. Though again, I would say or reiterate that manipulation is only one context. You know, just like in a way, I prefer Aditya's formulation because that's
I mean
kind of positive.
That is part of what Aditya said in a sense.
Yeah. Hemant?
Yes, sir. I also was. I was also saying that analyzing the everything in different way. So you can say by by going through each and every details or like it may like whether it is an true or false or whether it's a propaganda or not, whether we are being manipulated or not, like there are other things as well.
Okay. Anything you guys would have wanted to do in the course that you feel like we didn't do or we did not in enough depth? Or does it feel like there was too much material packed in or too little material stretched out?
I think, sir, according to mine, if the material was like not too heavy, but not just too right. Basically, it was more than right. I think.
Would you have wanted more different kinds of material, or I'm curious if anything drag on? Or
No, sir, material was basically good. Material was good if we talk about the like the variation in the readings. But I think that we also had many other courses. So this so it's basically if I suppose I have read this week's material, but in the end I will have problem to recall or
right,
read each and everything.
you just faced with too much stuff.
Yeah, I think because because this was in online mode, so we could read or complete our readings.
Anyone? Any other thoughts?
As Hemant said, I would say that course was very very good on the right path, but there's one thing that none of us can control, that the semester was too short, so it was a little bit paced. So maybe that's a thing we can't control.
So yeah, this topic is just too wide to fit into like 3-4 months.
Yeah, I'm now thinking of I'd like to actually just create a website or something, or you know, and
Yes, sir. That will be very good. And
like some kind of annotated website where for each topic one can go a little bit deeper with some kind
Yes,
of
sir.
references. So
I think, you should develop a website. Even you are in math and computing.
sorry.
You are also from computer background.
No, but that is like 20 years back. So my memory of maths and computer science is not even
Math and
20,
computer.
25 years ago. No, 20 years. Yeah, 2000 I graduated. Since then, I've not done a single bit of maths or computer science actually, apart from writing in LaTeX or whatever. Aditya, you were saying something?
I think there are a few websites such as that like based like focused on cognitive biases. I'll have to search for the links again, but I'll post them on Piazza if I can find them.
Please
Either
do.
on Piazza or in the form you said on in the 3 questions.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if it makes sense. I thought they're definitely different. You know, there are lots of books on critical thinking, and then there are lots of stuff on cognitive biases, and there's lots of stuff in philosophy of science. I've not seen something that tries to pull this all together. But anyway, that's something I'm thinking about in the future. So listen, it was fun. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Somebody wants to speak. Sujit.
Yeah, sir. There is actually a very similar idea to very similar side to your idea, World Economic Forum,
Okay.
where you center idea and then other parts surrounded by it, and then again a layer of some more details surrounded by it. So
No, okay, I should check that
you
out. Yeah, so that's what I had in mind is like lots of subsections and maybe ways of linking from one thing to the next. I don't know. I have to think. But listen, it was fun. It was fun to hang out with you guys in the course of the semester, and it's nice that you're all back on campus. And like I said, I also posted on Piazza that I'll be around on the major day in the major classroom, and it'll be nice if you feel like coming and saying hello. You can, no pressure. But otherwise, I hope to see some of you tomorrow, and all the best for majors. And I'll send you your PMTs like in the next couple of days. Yep.
So I wanted to say one last thing about the base rate thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, and I think there is a let's say coupled error to this, in which people consider base rate to the exclusion of everything else. Almost like you could imagine racism as an effect of that, in which people consider the race people are as washing out everything individual they know about them.
That's right. There must be a name for this also, right? You think all that matters is the statistical point of view and not enough. I think this comes up in the context of like, diagnostics, medical diagnostics, and, what clinicians do. So if a clinician looks at you, you come in with, I don't know, you come in with a high fever and they say, well, you have a high fever, you have a checklist of these 2-3 bits of statistical information about you and say, look, this is probably why you have the high fever, without actually checking in your particular context what else might be going on. That's the kind of thing I think another context where that sort of error might take place.
I'm not sure if that works exactly, because in this case, what the doctor is trying to do is trying to streamline the process of diagnosing you, right? Like,
yeah.
So I would not, like, especially if they are actually focusing on the correct statistics, I would not call this genuinely an error, because the correct statistics are like the correct statistics. They are helpful. But what I'm most saying that once you know that a person is in a category, you focus on that category and ignore everything else.
Right. Yeah, there must be a characterization of that kind of mistake, where essentially general features screen off any individual information about that person. That's the thing you're aiming at, right?
Yeah. I didn't get what he said exactly.
I was just repeating what you're saying actually. So listen, like I said, this was fun. All the best, and hope to see you around. If not tomorrow, then during majors, and if not majors, sometime next semester. Drop into my office. Send me an email first, because I'm usually here in the afternoons, not in the mornings. Yeah, Sujit.
Yes, what will be timing for the tube tomorrow?
I said between 4 to 6. So we'll have one at 4, between 4 to 5, and because you had said that you have something from 4 to 5, right? So 5 to 6, I said because of your request.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye bye. All the best.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.